Abel Carver measured his days by the silence between them. 13 years since Mary died. 13 years of dawn coffee on a porch that faced away from town deliberately. The morning sun cast long shadows across his Texas ranch, catching on. The dented tin cup in his weathered hands. The air carried the sharp temps of mesquite smoke from his dying fire, mingled with the earthy scent of dew-soaked soil. He sipped slowly, the bitter brew scalding his tongue just enough to remind him he was alive. Beyond the porch, the land stretched harsh and unyielding 40 acres of hard scrabble that demanded sweat and yielded little scrub oak twisted against the wind, their leaves whispering secrets he had no interest in hearing. The scream came thin on the wind, human, female, desperate. It sliced through the quiet like a knife through hide, echoing from the creek bend, a quarter-mile distant. Abel set his cup down slowly, deliberate in this, as in all things. His scarred hands remnants of Shiloh and the fever that took Mary instinctively toward the rifle leaning against the rail. He rose, joints protesting the motion after years of solitary labor, and scanned the horizon. The wind picked up, carrying dust that stung his eyes, but he heard it again, weaker now. A raw edge of surrender. He saddled his horse with the efficiency of a man who'd once scouted for the Union. Each buckle snapped tight, each knot doubled. The animal snorted, sensing his tension, its warm breath fogging the cool air. Abel mounted and rode toward the sound, rifle across his lap, eyes narrowed against the rising sun. The creek ran clear over smooth stones. Winter's fury subsided. Two springs' gentler flow. Cottonwoods lined the banks, their bark rough and peeling like old wounds. He dismounted, boots sinking into the soft mud that smelled of rot and renewal, and tethered the horse to a low branch. The woman lay curled against a boulder, stripped of clothing and dignity alike. Bruises bloomed purple on her pale skin, like storm clouds over prairie grass. Her feet were raw, scratched from thorns and rocks, blood mixing with creek mud in dark rivulets. Long dark hair matted with dirt framed a face hollowed by exhaustion, eyes wide but dry, no tears left, only the vacant stare of one who'd seen hell and expected no heaven. She didn't flinch as he approached. Her body tensed, but she held still, like a fawn frozen in the hunter's gaze. The air around her carried the faint metallic scent of blood and the sharper reek of fear sweat. Abel averted his eyes, the gesture instinctive from a war that had shown him cruelties beyond reckoning. He shrugged off his faded blue cavalry coat, one he still wore despite the memories stitched into its seams, and placed it on a flat rock within her reach. "Ma'am," he said, voice rough from disuse, like gravel under boot heels. "I'll turn away. Cabin's just beyond that rise when you're ready." He pivoted slowly, giving her space, his back broad and unmoving as a mesa. The wind tugged at his shirt, chilling the sweat on his neck, but he waited, listening to the rustle of fabric as she claimed the coat. He mounted without looking back, riding slow toward home. The complication weighed on him like an extra saddlebag, but some lines couldn't be crossed. War had taught him that ignoring cruelty only fed it. The ranch house loomed ahead, a low-slung cabin of weathered pine, its roof sagging under the weight of isolation. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, a thin gray thread against the vast blue sky. He unsaddled the horse, muscles aching from the short ride, and led it to the corral where two others grazed on sparse grass. The fence posts, mended countless times, leaned like weary sentinels inside. The cabin smelled of coffee and dust, the air thick with the ghosts of better days. Mary's chest sat in the corner, untouched, its lid gathering cobwebs. Abel cleared the small second room empty, since he'd built it for children that never came, sweeping the floor with a broom worn to nubs. He placed a dress from Mary's things on a hook, simple cotton faded to gray, along with undergarments and a brush. Then he retreated to the porch, pouring fresh coffee into Mary's cup, unused for 13 years. The porcelain was cool in his hands, fragile as memory. She appeared an hour later, the coat clutched around her like armor. Dirt streaked her face, but her eyes held a steady watchfulness, assessing him as one might a wild animal capable of harm, but perhaps not inclined. Her steps were careful, bare feet leaving faint prints in the dust. Abel gestured toward the interior without stepping closer. "Spare room's yours." He pointed to the door. "Left some of my late wife's things. Should fit well enough." He paused, words scraping out like rusty nails. "I don't ask questions that aren't offered answers." She nodded once, a barely perceptible movement, then stepped inside. Abel closed the front door behind her, the latch clicking softly, and moved to the porch. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth, cicadas buzzing in rhythmic waves. He heard the careful opening and closing of the bedroom door, then silence. Abel retrieved the cup, poured steaming coffee, and set it on the table beside a plate of cornbread and salt pork. Simple fare, but all he had. Then he returned outside, giving her the gift of solitude. Through the window, he watched her emerge. Eventually, Mary's dress hung loose on her thinner frame, but she wore it with a dignity that transcended the bruises. Her hands, slender but calloused from work, trembled slightly as she approached the table. She sat, eyeing the food warily, then ate with slow, deliberate movements, fork scraping plate, the chew of tough pork audible in the quiet. Abel turned away, focusing on the horizon where heat shimmered like a mirage dot. As twilight gathered, the distant rhythm of approaching horses pricked his ears. 3 riders, dust kicking up in their wake. Abel checked his rifle, the metal cool and familiar, and waited on the porch. The lead rider was broad-shouldered, grey-bearded, eyes cold as river stones. His sons flanked him, younger mirrors of his hard features. They reined in short of the cabin, horses snorting steam in the cooling air. "You Abel Carver," the eldest, barked, voice laced with ownership, as if the land itself bent to his will. "I am." Abel remained still, rifle propped casually but within reach. "I'm Jeremiah Holt. These are my boys, Samuel and Ezekiel." He gestured dismissively. "We're looking for my daughter-in-law. Trail leads here." Abel's jaw tightened, but his face stayed impassive. "This is private property, Mr. Holt." Jeremiah's mouth twisted beneath his beard. "Law says family has rights to retrieve their own." His eyes darted to the cabin windows, possessive, like a rancher eyeing stray cattle. "Law says a man's land is his to decide who stays and who doesn't." Abel shifted slightly, positioning himself between them and the door. Jeremiah dismounted with deliberate provocation, boots thudding into dust. "You harboring a thief, Carver. Woman stole family property when she ran. That's a criminal matter." Abel said nothing, holding the gaze with steady patience. The cabin door creaked open. Lena stepped out, face composed despite white knuckles on the frame. She stood tall, the dress a shield of reclaimed poise. Jeremiah's posture shifted to false paternalism. "Lena girl, time to come home. Whatever grievances, family sorts them privately." She remained silent, gaze unwavering. "You're embarrassing yourself," Jeremiah hardened, disrespecting Walter's memory. Samuel leaned forward, smile oily. "Come now, Lena. I've prepared the room just as you like it." Ezekiel averted his eyes, uncomfortable. "She stays if she chooses," Abel said, voice level. "That's all there is to it." Jeremiah's face darkened. "This isn't your affair, Carver." The woman's addled, like her mother before her. "Can't be trusted to make sound decisions." "Seems clear-minded to me," Abel replied. Lena stepped closer to Abel, her choice visible. Still silent, but defiant. Jeremiah clenched his saddle horn. "This isn't over, Carver, not by a long measure." They remounted and rode off, dust settling like a promise of storm. Abel turned to Lena. "Reckon we should prepare for that." She nodded, strength flickering in her eyes despite the fragility of her frame. The night deepened, stars pricking the vast sky, but the air hummed with unspoken threat. Abel barred the door, rifle by his side, while Lena sat by the fire, hands folded in her lap, strong enough to endure, fragile enough to break. The wind howled outside, carrying whispers of pursuit, and Abel knew isolation's walls had cracked. What came next would forge them both in the frontier's unforgiving fire. The next morning dawned crisp, frost trimming the grass like fragile lace. Abel rose before light, building the fire with kindling snapped from dry branches, each crack echoing in the quiet cabin. The flames licked upward, casting flickering shadows. On the walls, scarred by years of neglect, coffee bubbled in the blackened pot, its aroma cutting through the chill. He poured into his dented cup and stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking under his weight. The eastern sky bled pink, long shadows stretching like fingers across the land. Lena emerged shortly after, her movements quiet but purposeful. She had swept the floor the previous evening, imposing order on the sparse space shelves straightened. Dust banished. Now she stirred the embers, adding wood with hands that bore faint scars, perhaps from thorns or harsher grips. "Thank you," she said, voice soft but clear, the first words breaking her silence like dawn light. Abel nodded, handing her Mary's cup filled with steaming coffee. "From town, if you need more." He gestured vaguely toward the horizon. She sipped, the heat flushing her cheeks. "Stew last night. Not much to work with, more than I'd have done." His words were gruff, but appreciative. They ate in silence that eased from strained to companionable. Abel observed her covertly the careful way. She held the spoon, manners refined despite the bruises fading to yellow. Her eyes, dark and watchful, hinted at education, at a life before whatever storm had stripped her bare. When finished, she gathered dishes without prompt, washing them at the basin with water pumped cold from the well. Abel recognized the act, not subservience, but contribution. A way to claim space without debt. Midday brought him to the fence line, hammer in hand, nails clenched between teeth. The posts had loosened in winter floods, wood splintered and rotting. Sweat beaded on his brow, soaking his shirt as he drove stakes deep into clay soil that resisted like stubborn will. The sun beat down, relentless, the air shimmering with heat. In the distance, Lena tended a bare patch near the cabin, fingers working the earth, testing its unforgiving texture. Her dress sleeves rolled up, revealing arms marked by old welts. She knelt with a grace that contrasted her vulnerability. "Do you have seeds?" she asked later, approaching as he rinsed at the pump. Water splashed cold on his face, dripping from his beard. "Some in the shed. Vegetables from last year. Could I plant a garden here?" Abel considered the plot clay, prone to cracking in drought. "Land's not good for much. My mother grew in worse." A faint smile ghosted her lips, the first he'd seen. Softening the hollows of her cheeks, he led her to the shed. Tools hung in precise rows, everything in its place from military habit. The tin box of seeds, beans, squash, tomatoes felt light. In his hands, not much, enough to start. She took them reverently, fingers brushing his calloused palm. By sunset, furrows marked the ground, stones outlining boundaries. Abel watched from afar, hammer idle. This was more than planting. It was rooting, claiming future in barren soil. As darkness fell, a single horse approached, its gait plotting familiar. "Sheriff," Abel muttered, recognizing the rider. Lena's hands stilled in the dirt, but she rose steadily. Sheriff William Grant dismounted, hat in hand, mustache drooping like his spirits. At 51, he carried compromise in his slouched shoulders. "Evening carver." "Ma'am." He nodded, papers folded. In his pocket, Cherie. Abel's tone, neutral. Grant cleared his throat. "Holt filed for guardianship. Claims she's unwell." "She seems well to me." Abel's shoulders squared. Grant glanced at Lena, who met his eyes unblinking. He looked away. "Judge owes Holt. This won't go your way. Do I have a say?" Lena's voice cut sharp. "Legally, ma'am, not much. Widows under family protection, unless remarried or independent. And if employed," she pressed, "might help. But Holt's deep in pockets." He remounted, hearing Friday. "Sorry about this." After he left, Lena's hands clenched, soil-stained. No one else. Just us. The word us lingered, forging alliance in the fading light. Abel felt the shift, walls crumbling under her quiet strength. Dawn brought resolve. Abel saddled 2 horses, handing her reins. "Know someone who might help?" "I'll come." Not a request, a declaration. They rode to town, dust rising in their wake, the air thick with sage and tension. Tomas Reyes hammered at his forge, sparks flying like fireflies. At 44, his Mexican heritage marked him outsider, but his wit sharpened blades and minds alike. 3 years since the badge, Tomas said, quenching metal in steam. "Need legal help?" Abel handed the summons. Tomas examined it, eyes keen. As employee, different rights. He drafted swiftly. Contract for housekeeper, gardener, lodging as payment. "Will it work?" Lena asked. "Gives judge an out." Tomas's apron smelled of soot and resolve. The road back hummed with unspoken partnership. In town, curious eyes followed, nodding, whispers trailing like smoke. At the cabin, Lena reviewed the contract, fingers tracing words. "Thank you." Abel nodded, silence heavy with meaning. Night fell with riders' echoes. Abel barred doors, rifle loaded. Lena sat vigilant, strength in her fragile frame contrasting the storm brewing. The frontier's harshness forged them redemption in defiance, love tempered in adversity's fire. But the Holt's shadow loomed, promising danger that would test their mended bonds. Weeks blurred into routine laced with vigilance. Abel mended fences, under blistering sun, hammer strikes echoing like warnings. Lena's garden sprouted green shoots, her hands coaxing life from dirt, nails caked with earth that smelled of promise. Bruises faded, but wariness lingered in her eyes, a mirror to Abel's scarred soul. Town visits brought whispers. At Wheeler's store, Sarah leaned close, Holt's boys watching. "Be careful." Abel nodded, loading supplies, flour, coffee, fabric for... Lena eyes followed him out, judgment heavy as lead. Back home, stew simmered aromas of onion and venison filling the cabin. They ate quietly, forks scraping plates, fire crackling companionship. "Riders coming," Abel said one evening, ears pricked to distant hooves. Lena tensed, but stood firm. 3 shadows resolved into Holt's, Jeremiah leading. "Time's up," he growled, dismounting. "Woman comes home." "She is home," Abel replied, rifle ready. Jeremiah's laugh barked cold. "She's property, mine to claim." Lena stepped forward. "I'm no one's property." Samuel smirked. "We'll see." They left with threats hanging like nooses, but Lena's defiance sparked something in Abel Redemption's flame in isolation's ash. The hearing loomed, papers their shield, but as night deepened, a flicker of orange glowed on the horizon smoke, acrid and ominous. Fire licked the barn, horses screaming panic. Abel plunged into flames, heat searing skin, smoke choking lungs. Lena bucketed water, arms straining, face soot-streaked but fierce. By dawn, ruin smoked. "Them," Lena whispered. Abel nodded, resolve hardening. The frontier's cruelty catalyzed change, forging unbreakable bonds from broken lives. Packed bags signaled his plan. Lena found them, face-palming, leaving. "To end this," his voice rough with violence. "Whatever works." She gathered her things. "Then I go to..." Their argument, cracked walls, emotions spilling. A shattered teacup Mary's lass brought them. Kneeling together, mending shards with glue and tears. "Things break, but men stronger," Lena said. Abel stilled. "Not leaving to kill." Legal papers ranch in both names. Her eyes widened. "Why?" "Been alone too long." His hand covered hers. Partnership inked. They faced the night. A lone rider Jacob Holt brought warning. "They're coming to burn you out." Alliance grew, community stirring against tyranny. The stand approached, tension coiling like a spring dot. Dawn brought confrontation. 8 riders crested the rise, dust churning. Jeremiah halted, surprise at witnesses Reverend Sarah, Tomas, Eliza, harboring against will. Jeremiah claimed her choice. Abel countered. Lena stood tall. "I'm partner here." Words clashed, pistols drawn. Jacob defied family. "This ends." Balance shifted. Holtz retreated. Power cracked. Summer bloomed, garden thriving, barn rebuilt by allies. Evening porch, teacup shared, hands intertwined. "Teacher needed in town," Abel said. Lena smiled. "If partner agrees, he does." In mended silence, love forged in adversity bloomed. Frontier's harshness their catalyst for transformation. Summer deepened its hold on the Texas frontier. The sun, a relentless forge hammering the land into submission. Abel Carver woke to the familiar creak of the cabin door as Lena slipped out before dawn, her footsteps light on the dew-slick grass. 13 years of solitude had tuned his senses to every shift in the quiet, and now her presence wove through it like a new thread in worn fabric. He lay still for a moment, listening to the distant low of cattle, the rustle of leaves in the hot wind that carried the scent of parched earth and distant rain that never came. The ranch demanded vigilance. Drought had cracked the soil like old leather, and waterholes shrank to muddy puddles where coyotes lurked. Eyes gleaming in the twilight, he rose, joints aching from yesterday's labor, rebuilding the barn's frame with Jacob's help. The young Holt had stayed on, his hands calloused from honest work that distanced him from his family's shadow. Abel poured coffee into the mended teacup, its fine cracks, a reminder of fragility mended, and carried it to the porch. Lena was in the garden, kneeling amid rows of beans and squash that defied the heat, her fingers coaxing green from brown. Sweat beaded on her neck, soaking the collar of Mary's old dress, now tailored to fit her slimmer frame with stitches. She had sewn herself. The air hummed with bees drawn to the blossoms, their buzz a rare harmony in the harsh landscape. "Morning," Abel said, setting the cup on a stump beside her. His voice was gravel-rough, unused to softness. She looked up, wiping dirt from her hands on her apron, a faint smile touching her lips, not wide, but genuine, born of shared survival. "Coffee smells stronger today," added Chicory. He nodded, squatting to inspect a wilted leaf. "Saves the beans, drought's biting hard." Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement of the land's cruelty. No declarations of affection, no rushed confessions. Their bond had formed in the forge of necessity, tempered by respect for each other's scars. Lena's strength lay in her quiet defiance, planting roots where others saw barrenness, while Abel's was in his steadfast protection, a wall against the world's intrusions. Yet, beneath it, doubts stirred like dust devils on the horizon. For him, the fear of loss that had hollowed him since Mary's fever. For her, the whisper that she brought only trouble, a curse from her past life with the Holts. By midday, the sun scorched everything, heat waves rippling off the ground like breath from a dying fire. Abel rode the fence line with Jacob, wire cutters in hand, mending breaks where cattle had pushed through in search of greener pastures that didn't exist. The boy's face was sunburned, his Holt features softened by regret. "Posmen been seen in town," Jacob said, twisting wire with pliers that bit into his palms, talking loud about unfinished business. Abel grunted, wiping sweat from his brow with a scarred forearm. The air tasted of dust and salt, his throat parched, despite the canteen at his side expected as much. "Jeremiah, don't forget slights." Jacob hesitated, glancing back toward the cabin where Lena hung laundry, the sheets snapping in the wind like flags of truce. "It's her thereafter." Samuel's the worst, drinks and rants about reclaiming what's his. The words hung heavy, stirring Abel's inner storm. He had chosen isolation to escape such entanglements, building walls against the pain of connection. Now, Lena's presence cracked them, forcing him to confront the vulnerability of caring. Was it worth the risk? The frontier offered no mercy. One bad season, one raid, and all could vanish like smoke. They returned as thunderheads built in the west, dark promises of storm. Lena had prepared cornbread and beans, the aroma cutting through the oppressive heat. They ate on the porch, plates balanced on knees, the first rumbles echoing across the plains. Jacob excused himself to the bunkhouse Alinatu they'd built, from salvaged barnwood, leaving them alone. Lightning forked the sky, illuminating Lena's face in stark relief, her eyes reflecting the flash like polished stone. "Storm's coming fast," she said, voice steady but laced with memory's edge. Rain began to patter, fat drops drumming on the tin roof, releasing the pent-up scent of wet earth. Abel nodded, his hand brushing hers as he took her empty plate. The touch lingered a second longer than necessary, a silent reassurance. "We'll weather it." But as the wind howled, bending the cottonwoods, doubt gnawed at her. In the Holt house, storms had meant locked doors and raised voices, Walter's fists leaving marks that faded slower than bruises. Here, with Abel, safety felt tentative, a fragile web spun from mutual respect. Yet, her past whispered warnings. Men changed, kindness curdled under pressure. The rain intensified, sheets slamming against the cabin, mud churning the yard into a slick mire. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the walls, and Lena flinched instinctively, her body remembering blows. Abel noticed, setting the plates aside. "You all right?" She straightened, forcing calm. "Old habits. Walter hated storms, blamed me for the noise." Somehow, his jaw tightened, anger flickering like the lightning. "He can't touch you now." But the words stirred her inner conflict. Dependence on Abel's protection chafed against her hard-won independence. She had survived the creek, the humiliation. She wouldn't be a burden. As the storm raged, they sat in silence, the roar outside mirroring the turmoil within. By morning, the creek had swollen to a torrent, brown water rushing over stones, carrying debris from upstream branches, a drowned coyote, reminders of nature's indifference. The drought broke violently, flooding lowlands and washing out the trail to town. Abel surveyed the damage at dawn, boots sinking into mud that sucked like quicksand. The corral fence sagged, cattle milling restlessly, their hides slick and steaming. Lena joined him, skirt hitched up, helping to shore posts with rocks hauled. From the creek bed, her arms strained, muscles corded from garden work, but the effort grounded her. A counter to the vulnerability of the night before. Bridge might be out, Abel said, hammering a stake, the mallet thudding dully in the saturated ground. She nodded, wiping rain from her face. We'll need supplies soon. Flowers low. Jacob approached, hat brim dripping. I can ride upstream. Check the crossing. But as he saddled up, distant gunfire, cracked sharp reports echoing off the ridges. Abel stilled, rifle in hand before the sound faded. Hunters. Jacob shook his head. Too close, and not deer season. Tension coiled, the storm's aftermath amplifying the threat. The frontier's isolation, once Abel's refuge, now felt like a from help, with Holtz lurking like wolves at the edge. They fortified the ranch that day, stacking sandbags against floodwaters, sharpening tools that could double as weapons. Lena's hands blistered from rope work, the burn a tangible link to their shared struggle. In quiet moments, their eyes met, respect deepening into something unspoken, forged in sweat and vigilance. Evening brought uneasy calm, the sky clearing to a star-pricked vastness. They sat by the fire, flames crackling pine resin, the warmth chasing the chill from damp clothes. Lena mended a tear in Abel's shirt, needle flashing in the light, her stitches precise as a teacher's script. "You were a scout," she said softly, breaking the silence. Sarah mentioned. He poked the fire, sparks rising. Union side. Saw enough to last a lifetime. "What made you stop?" "Shiloh. Bullet in the thigh." But the real wound was watching good men die for lines on a map. His fingers traced the scar unconsciously, the fabric rough under his touch. She nodded, tying off the thread. "I taught school before Walter. Loved the quiet moments when a child understood something new. Their stories intertwined like roots in soil, each revelation building trust. No rush to intimacy. It grew organically from shared burdens, demands, the Holtz shadow. But inner doubts persisted. Abel wondered if opening his heart invited loss. Lena feared her past tainted any future. The next day, Jacob returned with news from town, his horse lathered from the ride. Samuel's stirring trouble. Bought dynamite from the mining supply, says it's 4 stumps, but folks know better. Abel's face hardened, the air thick with unspoken fear. The frontier amplified every threat. A blast could shatter their fragile peace, turning the ranch to rubble. They prepared quietly, Lena loading rifles with steady hands, her fragility belying inner steel. As night fell, coyotes howled, their cries a harbinger, pulling them closer in defense. Weeks passed in a rhythm of labor and watchfulness. The garden yielded its first harvest beans, crisp and green, squash heavy in hand. Lena cooked them with salt pork, the steam carrying flavors of earth and effort. They ate under the stars, Jacob joining, the three forming an unlikely family against the vast emptiness. But rumors filtered in. Holtz buying influence, bribing the new deputy, their grip tightening like a noose. One afternoon, heat mirages danced on the horizon as Abel and Lena rode to check the herd. Dust coated their throats, the sun-baking saddles hot to the touch. Cattle lowed plaintively, ribs showing through hide-strouts return after the flood. The land's capricious cruelty. They dismounted at a shrinking waterhole. The mud cracked like pottery glaze. "Something's wrong," Lena said, pointing to tracks boot prints mingled with horseshoes. "Not theirs." Abel knelt, fingers tracing the imprints. Fresh. 2 men, maybe 3. Her pulse quickened, the air suddenly oppressive. Holtz, likely. He scanned the ridges, rifle unslung. They rode back tense, the connection between them a lifeline. That night, as wind whispered through cracks, Lena confided by the fire. "I dream of them sometimes." Samuel's hands, Jeremiah's voice claiming ownership. Abel stirred the coals. "Won't happen. Not while I breathe." But his words masked his own turmoil. Protecting her meant risking the solitude that had shielded him from grief. The frontier demanded choices: survive alone or together. Each path laced with peril. Conflict escalated when riders appeared at dawn. Not Holtz, but rustlers drawn by drought-weakened herds. Gunfire erupted, bullets whining past as Abel and Jacob returned fire from behind rocks, the acrid smell of powder burning nostrils. Lena, from the cabin, shot true, her bullet felling a horse, the rider scrambling away. The skirmish ended with rustlers fleeing, but one cow lay dead, blood soaking the dirt. In the aftermath, as they buried the animal, sweat mixing with blood on hands, their bond deepened. Lena bandaged Abel's grazed arm, her touch gentle eyes, meeting his with gratitude and something warm respect evolving in shared danger. Yet, inner shadows loomed. Abel pulled away slightly, fearing attachment. Lena questioned her worth, haunted by past abuse. The border's harshness, endless sky pressing down, isolation amplifying every whisper, tested them, but also bound them tighter. As autumn hinted, with cooler winds, a letter arrived via Sarah, territorial marshal investigating Holtz for fraud. But Samuel vowed revenge. Tension mounted, the ranch a fortress. One evening, rain pattering again, Lena and Abel shared the porch, teacup passing between them. "You're thinking of leaving," she said, reading his silence. He shook his head, thinking of fighting smarter. "With you," her hand covered his, calluses meeting calluses, no vows, just commitment forged in adversity. But as thunder rolled, a distant explosion echoed dynamite, perhaps a warning. The threat closed in, their fragile relationship teetering on the edge of survival. Months ground on, the land cycling through drought and flood, mirroring their inner ebbs. Lena's teaching resumed part-time in town, her rides back escorted by Abel, dust trails marking their path. Children adored her, their laughter a bomb, but whispers followed Holt sympathizers calling her tainted. She bore it with chin high, but at night, doubts surfaced. "Do I bring you shame?" Abel, mending harness by lamplight, met her gaze. "You bring life." Their conversations deepened, sharing fragments of past his war horrors, her abusive marriage. Respect bloomed into affection, slow as desert flowers after rain. But external pressures mounted. Holt sabotaged water rights, filing claims that threatened the ranch. Legal battles loomed, papers yellowed and crisp in hand. One night, under a moon like polished silver, they walked the creek, water murmuring, over stones. "I never thought I'd trust again," Lena admitted, her voice blending with the flow. "Nor I," Abel replied, his arm brushing hers. A shot rang out. Ambush. They dropped, hearts pounding, as figures melted into shadows. Pursuit yielded nothing, but the incident shattered calm. Inner conflicts raged. Abel's fear of loss drove him to patrol endlessly, exhausting him. Lena's guilt pushed her to consider leaving to protect him. Community rattled Sarah to Moss, Reverend forming a network against Holtz. But the frontiers, isolation bred paranoia, every shadow a threat. Their bond, tested, grew resilient. Like mesquite roots delving deep for water. Climax built with a Holt raid at midnight, torches flaming. Abel and Lena fought side by side, gunfire flashing, smoke choking. Jacob turned on his kin, disarming Ezekiel. Jeremiah fled wounded, power broken. In dawn's light, amid ruins, they embraced not passion, but profound connection. The harsh border had forged them, mending fractures with shared strength. Yet, scars remained, promising future trials, but together,